talk about how safe it is for kids to go back to school. Someone who's been campaigning throughout this to keep children in school, making sure they're getting their education and all of the other things that come with children being in the place they should be, which is in the classroom, is Robert Halfon. He's chair of the Education Select Committee and Tory MP for Harlow. Good morning to you, Robert.
Good morning. Hello.
Thank you for joining us. Now, we're really hopeful that on Monday, when we get this roadmap out of lockdown, please God, on Monday, we'll hear that children in primary school at least will go back on March the 8th. And there's a lot of hope now that secondary schools could go back pretty soon as well. But bearing in mind, within 2 weeks of March the 8th, we've got we're going to be heading into sort of Easter holidays relatively soon. We know we need to get those secondary school pupils back as soon as possible. We're looking at mid-April. How soon realistically can we get all secondary school pupils back? And when people talk about a staggered return, how would that work?
Well, the Prime Minister said that schools will go back on March the 8th. And my view is that all schools should go back on March the 8th, give or take a few days in case there were incidents of coronavirus in schools and so on. But we need a coalition of the willing. And there are many academies, there are many teaching support staff, there are some moderate trade unions who want to keep the schools open. And what we should do is have a coalition of the willing to prepare for school opening and ensure that all the kind of computer says no people are sidelined because they just want to keep the schools closed. What I'm worried about, if there is a phased opening, is, as you say, the schools won't open till after Easter, and then children will have lost even more days in school, many months, in fact.
What about those who say, we spoke to a member of one of the very much more sensible teaching unions a little bit earlier, but talking about the need for a return to be staggered, so you can't have 8 million, 10 million children. I mean, obviously, lots of children are already still in school because they're key workers' children or vulnerable. But you can't have 10 million children all suddenly back at school on one day and not see a spike in cases, we are told. Now, lots of evidence. Warwick University study suggesting last week that actually it's the it's schools reflecting community rates of transmission rather than schools driving those rates of transmission. But a lot of people have been told again and again the schools aren't safe, teachers aren't safe, parents aren't safe, kids aren't safe. I mean, a lot of this completely not based on any science, let alone the science. You can understand why lots of people are concerned. But what about this issue that if all the kids go back on the same day and if you did see a spike, then actually within a week or two, we'd be sending all the kids home again?
But by March the 8th, millions more will have been vaccinated. We've already almost completed the elderly and the clinically vulnerable, so people are much safer than they were in the past. The government scientists themselves say that schools are not vectors of transmission. Even Professor Neil Ferguson, the biggest lockdown person of all, has said that schools now have the bandwidth to reopen again. And we have to make a decision as a society. What about the risks to children in terms of their educational attainment, their mental health, their safeguarding, their prospects in life in terms of earnings? So those are the kind of decisions we have to make, and we have to do everything we can to get most schools open by the 8th of March.
I mean, that would be my absolute dream, I have to say. And it's fascinating, isn't it, that how many people who talk about, and we've seen Sir Keir Starmer with his speech yesterday about needing to tackle inequality and to help people and to make things more fair across society. You think literally the most unfair thing that is happening right now is the lockdown, and particularly the lockdown on children, where it is the children in the poorest families, the most disadvantaged areas, in the worst schools, who are getting the least help and who are being damaged the most and who would be most helped by being back in the classroom.
Well, every day that schools are closed, we are damaging the lives of these children, and we know that their mental health problems have gone up enormously. And I don't understand why governments, why the scientists don't take mental health with children as seriously as they do in terms of schools opening and closing. So we have to get our schools open again. We have to have a coalition of the willing. There are many people out there. I get loads of emails and messages sent to me by teachers and support staff who want to get the schools open again. The problem is we usually hear from the usual suspects. The computer says no suspects, who just in essence want to keep children at home all the
Well,
time,
but
and that has
this
got to be
And
stopped.
this is a strange thing. At the front of the newspaper today, they've had a poll of asking people about lockdown. I mean, some people, the majority of their people they polled were saying, "Oh, they're not even sure about hospitality being opened by June." I mean, for goodness sake, I mean, we would have plummeted. I mean, bearing in mind, by the way, COVID cases around the world plummeted 50%. They've plummeted 50%. I mean, the stats are all in the right direction. They really are. But only 52% of the people they polled wanted schools to go back on March the 8th. Only 52%. And I am absolutely staggered by that, because every parent I know from every background, and people get in touch with me, are tearing their hairs out. Not about, oh, I'm having to try and homeschool. Not that. They are so worried about their children and their children's friends. They are just so terrified of what is being done to them, being sitting on a screen, even if they're getting lessons. They're lucky enough to have lessons all day, sitting on a screen alone in their bedrooms all day, instead of mixing and playing sport and being carefree. I could weep for what we've done to our children.
Well, the interesting thing is when I first started campaigning for schools to be open, for the kids to be back in school, I had a lot of stick from everyone. Now I get emails from parents who just realised just how tough it's been to look after their children and want to get their children back in school. And the only people who attack me now are the sort of far left, who call me a murderer and Lord Haw and whatever it may be. But you take all that
Lord Haw for wanting poor kids to be back in
to go back
school.
into school.
Yeah,
So let them carry on doing that. And the public want the kids to go
yeah.
back to school. They know how damaging it is. They know how hard it is to look after their children at home. And all we're doing is recreating a have and have not society where the disadvantaged learn the least and will struggle the most for months, if not years, in terms of catch up.
Absolutely. Rob Halfon, thank you so much for joining us, Chair of the Education Select Committee, Tory MP for Harlow. Really appreciate that. I appreciate all you've done on this. Thank you very much indeed for talking to us. Dave Chawner is listening to that. I know you haven't got kids, but I mean, there is something very strange about a society that has spent years and years saying, oh, isn't it terrible, children on technology and sitting on gadgets and alone in their rooms and talking about children mental health incessantly. And then as a society, not just the government, but the public supporting locking children in their bedrooms, 23 hours a day, keeping them away from friends and not getting properly educated and not playing sport. And I mean, it does seem bizarre, a bizarre volte-face on the part of this country.
Yeah, exactly. And it breeds into that thing you were saying, that people are scared, people are worried. And, it's that, I think that's the sort of reason people don't know what to believe anymore. And I think that people are unthreading.
Yeah, do you know what? I think the less people know about COVID, the less people actually know about the facts and the risks to them and to other members of their family. And absolutely, this is a dangerous virus. I was absolutely thrilled when my parents in their 70s got the vaccine. Never made light of this at all. But if people actually know the real threat to them, to their children, and actually read up on the data and all the range of evidence, I think people will be a lot less scared. I really do. And I think that's what's so sad, is the people who are the most scared and trying to keep us all in lockdown are the people who actually know the least. That's one of the things that worries me.